Hey there, deep divers. Ready to dive
As
in.
always.
Awesome. Today we're looking at the Supreme Court ruling on that whole U.S. TikTok ban thing.
Yeah.
We've got excerpts from the actual ruling itself, which is always fun to try to parse through.
Legal jargon.
Yeah. And a super helpful FAQ someone put together that kind of breaks it down a little bit more for normal human beings.
Right, right.
And this is fascinating to me because this is way bigger than just some app.
Yeah.
This ruling touches on freedom of speech, national security, big tech, the power of algorithms, all this crazy stuff.
Yeah, I think it really gets to like the heart of how we interact with technology these days.
Oh, totally.
And the trade-offs we might have to make in a world where,
right.
data is king.
Totally. Okay, so before we get into the legal stuff, the weeds,
Yeah.
let's just start with TikTok itself.
Okay.
I think a lot of people think it's just like silly dances and viral trends.
Right.
But it's a lot bigger than that.
It's a social media giant with over 170 million users in the U.S. alone.
Wow.
That's almost half the country.
That's crazy.
Scrolling through billions of videos.
It's that for you page, right? That's what keeps people hooked.
That's designed to keep you hooked.
Yeah.
It uses this like super sophisticated algorithm that learns what you like, what you watch, and then it just serves up more and more of that stuff tailored just for you.
Oh, totally.
It's super personalized and, let's be honest, highly addictive.
Yeah.
But it's not just algorithms. TikTok also uses human moderators
Oh, interesting.
to help shape what you see,
Okay.
which becomes important later on.
Okay. All right. So why did the U.S. government get so spooked by TikTok?
Right.
It's all about national security concerns, right?
Right.
And this isn't like some partisan thing. Like both the Trump and Biden administrations were worried about this.
Yeah, they were both concerned.
Okay. So what is that core fear?
The core fear is that TikTok's Chinese parent company, ByteDance, could be forced to share all that user data with the Chinese government.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
and we're not just talking about usernames and passwords here.
No.
The ruling is this kind of chilling example.
Yeah.
If you let TikTok access your contacts to find friends,
Right.
it gets access to data for people not even on TikTok.
Right.
Like names, phone numbers, job titles, even personal notes,
Wow.
all that stuff.
Yeah, so the FBI is worried that this data could be used to track government employees, blackmail people, or even steal corporate secrets.
It's wild.
Yeah.
The gold mine for espionage.
Espionage it is.
So, okay, that's a lot of data.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of scary to think what someone could do with that information.
Right.
So, big question, does banning TikTok violate freedom of speech?
It seems like it would. Right.
Yeah.
On the surface, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the court even acknowledged that the ban does likely burden free speech.
Okay.
Although they didn't make a definitive ruling on that.
Oh, interesting.
But they focused on corporate control, not direct censorship of what people are posting.
So how did the court approach this whole free speech dilemma?
Yeah.
Figure out those different levels of scrutiny they use.
Right, like a legal magnifying glass.
Yeah, totally.
So they could have used strict scrutiny,
Okay.
which is at the highest level.
Ah,
But they went with what's called intermediate scrutiny,
okay.
which means the government has more leeway to restrict TikTok compared to, say, banning a newspaper,
Right.
because they're focusing on data, not directly on what people are saying.
That makes sense.
You see?
Yeah. And the court seemed to see TikTok as like a unique case.
Yeah, they highlighted its massive size, the sensitive data it collects, and its potential connection to a foreign adversary as key factors.
Interesting, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's dive into the arguments in favor of the ban.
Okay.
In this part, we're going to unpack those and see why TikTok's counter-arguments didn't sway the court.
Sounds good.
So lay it on me.
So the government successfully argued that data security is like a super important interest, especially in today's digital age.
Of course.
And the court basically gave Congress and the president some leeway in judging those potential future risks, especially in those complex areas like national security.
Right.
They're dealing with shadowy stuff. We trust your judgment to a certain extent. So they gave them the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, they basically said, we trust you to figure out what those risks are.
Exactly. They also dismissed arguments that the ban was what they call under-inclusive.
Okay.
So TikTok argued the ban was unfair because it only targeted them,
Right.
not other companies with data privacy issues.
Right, of which there are many.
Exactly. But the court wasn't buying it.
Okay.
They were laser focused on TikTok's specific characteristics and the potential threat from that connection to China.
So what about TikTok's side of the story?
Right.
How did they defend themselves?
So they argued that warning users restricting data sharing or even that proposed national security agreement they were working on would be enough to address the concerns.
Okay, so like, just put some safeguards in place and we're good.
Yeah, exactly. But that didn't convince the court.
No.
No, the court basically said, look, we're not going to second guess the government's chosen solution.
Okay.
As long as it's not completely out of proportion to the risk.
Right.
We're not going to micromanage how they handle this.
So they're like, we trust them to figure out the solution.
Yeah, we trust you guys.
Okay.
Figure it.
Now, there's another layer to all this.
Oh, yeah.
The concern about content manipulation.
Yes.
So the government also argued that TikTok's algorithm could be used to subtly influence what people see.
Right.
Maybe for political purposes or other shady stuff.
Right, like pushing certain narratives without people even realizing it's happening.
Oh, that's so creepy.
It's a very subtle form of potential control.
But isn't recommending content what all else social media platforms do?
That's a good question.
Is TikTok really that different?
Right, and the court didn't really dive deep into whether this is a form of content-based censorship or not. They felt the data collection issue alone, especially given Congress's intense focus on it, was enough to justify the ban.
Got it.
So those data security concerns were front and center.
Front and center.
In the court's decision.
Okay, so what's the final verdict?
Yeah, so essentially the court said, yeah, we get it. The ban is a drastic measure.
Right.
But the T's or risks are serious.
Okay.
And the government did spend a lot of time trying other options.
Yeah.
So we're going to uphold this ban.
This whole case is a whirlwind.
It is.
It really highlights how seemingly harmless apps can get caught up in these massive geopolitical issues.
Right.
It makes you think twice about which apps you use.
Absolutely. And it brings up those even bigger questions about data privacy in the digital age, which we'll get into in the next part.
I'm ready.
We'll explore how this ruling might impact other apps and what it means for all of us as users.
Ooh, that's a good cliffhanger. Can't wait.
Stay tuned.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is a complex issue.
Yeah.
With no easy answers.
Yeah.
This case has definitely made me think about how much of my personal data I'm willing to just hand over to these companies.
Yeah, me too. It makes you think twice about just clicking accept on those terms and conditions, right?
Absolutely. But what's interesting is the court didn't really address another key aspect of this whole thing.
Okay.
The fact that ByteDance, TikTok's parent company,
Right.
is subject to Chinese law.
And that's a big deal because
Chinese law requires companies to assist in intelligence work and can even compel them to hand over private data.
Oh, wow.
So even if ByteDance wanted to protect user data,
Right.
they could be legally forced by the Chinese government to compromise it.
They're in a tough spot no matter what they do.
Exactly.
And to be honest, this whole situation with TikTok feels like just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to data privacy.
Exactly. It raises this much larger conversation about data privacy in the digital age.
No.
Think about all the apps we use daily.
Oh my gosh, so many.
Social media, fitness trackers, shopping apps.
All of them.
They're all collecting data on us.
It's kind of freaky.
It is.
I mean, I recently saw an ad for something I only talked about with my friend.
Oh, yeah.
It's like they're listening.
Right.
And it's not always clear how that data is being used.
Right.
Who has access to it or how secure it really is.
That's the unsettling part. We're often handing over our personal information without fully understanding the implications.
So what can we do about it?
Right.
Is there any way to protect our privacy in this, like, data-hungry world?
That's the million-dollar question. It's not easy, but we're not totally powerless. Being aware of the issue is the first step.
Okay.
We need to be more mindful of what information we're sharing online and be skeptical of those free services that seem too good to be true.
Right. Like if you're not paying for the product, you are the product.
Exactly. And remember, you always have the right to opt out of data collection whenever possible. Take the time to adjust your privacy settings and limit the information you share with apps.
It can feel overwhelming.
It can.
But it's important to take control of our digital footprint.
Absolutely. And don't be afraid to delete apps that you're not comfortable with.
Yeah.
Sometimes the simplest solutions are the best.
True.
Now, shifting gears a bit.
Okay.
There's another aspect of the court's decision I think deserves a closer look.
Okay.
The qualified divestiture requirement.
The what now?
Yes, the potential escape hatch for TikTok.
Okay.
Remember, the ban only kicks in if TikTok doesn't go through this qualified divestiture.
Okay.
Which basically means severing ties with China completely.
Okay.
No more Chinese control, no more data sharing, no more backdoor access for the Chinese government.
Got it.
It's a clean break.
Okay, so they could still operate in the U.S. if they cut ties with China completely.
In theory, yes, but here's the catch.
Uh-oh.
The court didn't explicitly define what a qualified divestiture actually entails.
Okay.
It's kind of vague, which raises a whole bunch of questions.
Like, how do you prove a company has completely disentangled itself from its former ties?
Right.
Especially when it comes to something as complex as algorithms and data infrastructure.
It's a daunting task, to say the least, and it leaves a lot of room for interpretation and potential loopholes.
So what happens next? Will TikTok actually try to divest?
Right.
And if so, will it be enough to satisfy the court and lift the ban?
That's the big cliffhanger. Time will tell how this all plays out, but one thing's for sure.
What's that?
This case is going to have a ripple effect throughout the tech industry.
Yeah.
Impacting not just TikTok, but other companies with international connections.
The precedent. Right.
Exactly. If we connect this to the bigger picture.
Yeah.
It's not just about one app. It's about the evolving relationship between governments and big tech.
Oh, that's a good point.
We're in uncharted territory, and the stakes couldn't be higher.
It's a fascinating, albeit somewhat unsettling time to be following this story.
It is.
What else did the court's ruling touch on?
Well, one detail that caught my eye was the exclusion of certain review platforms from the definition of a covered company.
What does that mean?
So the law focuses on covered companies,
Okay.
which are basically defined as social media companies that collect personal data and have connections to foreign governments.
Right.
But for some reason, product business and travel review platforms are specifically excluded.
Huh. Interesting.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
The court didn't delve too deep into why those platforms were excluded.
Are they considered less of a national security risk?
Right.
Or is there something else at play?
It's unclear, but it's definitely something worth pondering.
Yeah.
Are review sites really that different from other social media platforms when it comes to data?
Right. I mean, they collect a lot of information about users, too.
That's a good point, and it does raise questions about consistency and fairness. If the government is truly concerned about data security, shouldn't all platforms be subject to the same level of scrutiny?
Yeah. That's a valid argument. Maybe this is just the beginning of a much broader regulatory push.
Right.
It's like opening Pandora's box.
Is.
Once you start down this path of regulating data,
Yeah.
where do you draw the line?
That's the challenge for lawmakers.
Yeah.
Striking that delicate balance between national security, personal privacy, and freedom of expression.
Right.
Like it's trying to solve a multi-dimensional Rubik's Cube.
Oh my gosh.
One wrong move and everything falls apart.
And we're living in a world where technology is evolving faster than our ability to regulate it.
It is.
This case just highlights the complexity of the challenges we face.
Absolutely.
It's enough to make your head spin.
It is, but hey, that's why we're here, X.
I guess so.
To help you navigate these choppy waters, we'll continue to unpack these issues and explore the potential consequences, both for the tech industry and for us, the users.
So stay tuned, deep divers. We've still got more to uncover.
All right, deep divers, we're back. We've really dug into this Supreme Court ruling on the TikTok ban, explored those arguments, and, touched on some of those bigger questions.
Right.
But we're not quite done yet. There were a couple of concurring opinions that really stood out to me.
Yeah.
Adding some, extra layers to this whole thing.
Yeah, you're talking about Justice Sotomayor and Justice Gorsuch, right?
Yes.
They both agreed with the majority decision, but had some pretty interesting things to say in their own separate opinions.
Justice Sotomayor did not hold back.
No, she did not.
She basically said the act does impact the First Amendment.
She argued that TikTok is engaging in expressive activity by compiling and curating content.
Oh, interesting.
Essentially, they're acting like a publisher. And since the ban restricts their ability to do that,
right,
she's saying that directly burdens free speech.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
So it's not just about the users posting videos.
Right.
It's about TikTok itself as a platform for expression. And she also pointed out that content creators have a First Amendment right to choose their preferred platform for expressing themselves.
Right. Exactly.
So forcing them off TikTok is a big deal.
It is. It's limiting their choices.
Yeah.
And it's not just about the content creators themselves.
Okay.
Justice Sotomayor also highlighted how the ban, even with that divestiture option, could limit TikTok's ability to collaborate on its recommendation algorithm.
So even if they get rid of Chinese control,
right,
their ability to innovate and evolve as a platform could still be restricted.
Exactly.
So even if they jump through all the hoops to stay in the U.S.,
right,
They might still be limited in what they can do.
Yeah, and Justice Sotomayor sees that as a potential problem for free speech.
Okay.
It's not just about ownership. It's about the ongoing development and refinement of the technology that drives the platform. And that she argues is intertwined with freedom of expression.
Wow, that's a really interesting perspective.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, now what about Justice Gorsuch? What were his main points?
Well, one thing that stood out to me was his clear rejection of the government's argument about preventing covert content manipulation.
Oh, okay.
He essentially called out the government for trying to control speech under the guise of national security.
So he was skeptical of their motives.
Yeah, he argued that what the government calls manipulation is often just editorial discretion.
Okay.
Which is protected under the First Amendment.
Right.
It's like saying any publication that chooses to highlight certain stories over others is engaging in manipulation.
Oh, that's a good point.
Right.
Yeah.
So he was basically defending the right of platforms to curate content, even if it might influence what people see.
That makes sense.
And he also expressed concern about the use of classified evidence in this case.
Oh, wow.
Evidence that the petitioners weren't even allowed to see.
Wait, they were arguing against a ban based on evidence they couldn't even look at?
Yeah, it does raise some serious due process issues.
Oh, yeah.
How can you defend yourself against secret evidence?
Right? It's like playing a game where the other side has all the cards and you can't even look at your own hand.
Exactly.
It doesn't seem fair.
It doesn't.
So both Justice Sotomayor and Justice Gorsuch, while agreeing with the majority decision, raised some important concerns about the potential implications of this ban for freedom of speech and due process.
They did.
Okay.
And Justice Gorsuch went even further, saying that while he understands the government's interest in preventing a foreign adversary from spying on Americans, he's not entirely convinced that this law is the best way to do it.
So he's basically saying there might have been other less restrictive ways to address those national security concerns without resorting to like a full-blown ban.
Exactly. And that brings us back to the central question of this whole deep dive.
With that.
How do we balance national security with individual rights in the digital age?
It's a tough question.
It is.
And the Supreme Court ruling doesn't provide any easy answers.
No, it doesn't.
It's just one step in what's likely to be a long and complicated legal battle.
Right, and it raises a lot of questions about the future of the internet.
Yeah, does it ever?
Will we see more government intervention in social media platforms?
Right.
Will data privacy become like the defining issue of the 21st century?
It feels like it's already becoming that.
It does.
Yeah.
These are questions we as a society need to grapple with.
Yeah.
There's a lot at stake, and it's going to require thoughtful debate and careful consideration.
This deep dive has given us a lot to chew on.
It has.
It's been a wild ride through the legal and technological landscape.
It has been.
Exploring the Supreme Court's rationale for upholding the TikTok ban.
Right.
Diving into those complex issues of data privacy and content moderation.
Yeah.
And then, examining those dissenting opinions that highlighted the tension between national security and freedom of expression.
A lot of tension there.
And that's what the deep dive is all about.
Yes.
Exploring complex issues, challenging assumptions, and leaving you with something to think about.
Something to ponder.
What role do you want technology to play in your life?
Yeah.
And what sacrifices are you willing to make in the name of security?
That's the question.
Think about it, talk about it, and let's continue the conversation.
Yes.
Until next time, deep divers.